Are you a complete beginner or novice hiker who has been overwhelmed by the amount of information there is out there on exactly what footwear you should be using on the trail? Or are you an experienced hiker who has been hiking for years in ill-fitting footwear? If that sounds like you, then in this video I am hoping to cover all the questions that you might have about exactly how to choose the right shoes or boots for your next adventure. Now before we go any further here, I want to start off by saying that I am by no means an expert on this subject, and you should go and seek professional help for getting exactly the right fit on your next hiking shoe or hiking boot. Having said that though, I have just recently completed a 1700 kilometre through hike of the North Island section of Te Aroha here in New Zealand, and I also have about 2 to 2.5 years worth of experience hiking and choosing the right footwear for my feet. There is no substitution for a proper shoe or boot fitting service though, so I do highly recommend that in conjunction with watching this video you go and seek some professional advice. So I would say that the most important thing when you're deciding on what kind of footwear you're going to use on your next adventure is to make sure you're thinking about picking the right shoe for you. Now what do I mean when I say that? Well, I mean that every single hiker is different. Some people are hiking out in the very high mountains, other people are hiking in primarily desert terrain, and some people are just hiking through very wet and muddy conditions all the time. So before you go out to purchase your next pair of footwear, have a really good think about exactly what you need from that pair of shoes. Do you need it to be a very rigid and sturdy boot, for example, because you're hiking through dangerous and rocky or uneven terrain? Or are you a little bit more like me and you just need a lightweight shoe that can dry out very quickly because you tend to hike through a lot of wet or muddy conditions? Having a really good think about that before you go out to the shoe shop to purchase those new pair of shoes is going to save you a lot of time and probably a lot of money in the future. Part of that consideration will also be thinking about the kind of distance that you are going to be going in those shoes. I'm a really good example for this. Over the last summer hiking season I hiked over 1700 kilometers on a long distance trail. Compared to your average or standard hiker or tramper here in New Zealand who maybe might do 1 or 2 multi-day trips over the course of the year where they're hiking anywhere between 15 to 25 kilometers per day. And then finally, you also want to have a really good think about where you have had issues in the past. Think about the problems that you've had with all of the previous footwear that you've owned. Where have you felt those spots that are rubbing? Where have you felt discomfort when you've been wearing those shoes? Where are your pressure points? Where are the places that you've had issues? If you're dealing with a professional shoe or boot fitter, then you're going to want to tell them those things when you're actually in the shop with them so that they can find a much better solution for you. The next most important thing I want to impress on you right on the outset is don't underestimate the power of a good pair of socks. And when you're going out to try on shoes or boots that you're thinking of buying, make sure that you are taking the right pair of socks with you. Now of course most of us know that when you go into a shoe shop, typically there is a box full of socks that you can try on with those shoes when you're actually in the shop, but in my opinion this is no substitute for your actual socks. And I've also noticed when I've been rummaging through those boxes of socks, not always do they contain the right kind of socks for the particular activity you're looking at doing. Now a lot of people who end up with ill-fitting or uncomfortable boots or shoes will often blame the boot or the shoe for that. But what a lot of people don't actually realise is that the sock plays a major part in how that shoe or boot is fitting. For example, if you want to hike just in a very lightweight pair of thin cotton socks, you're probably going to be a lot more uncomfortable than somebody who chooses a sock with a little bit more cushioning and padding around the areas that you need it, and something that's maybe made from a more natural fibre like a merino, which will dry out and wick sweat and moisture away from your skin. So picking out the right pair of socks for what you need for your adventure is a really important consideration. And you're going to get the most accurate fit out of your shoe and boot if you're taking those socks with you when you go to purchase your footwear. The next thing that you want to be thinking about is making sure that you are getting a shoe or a boot that is comfortable for you. Now if you're not used to purchasing shoes or boots and you really have no idea what you need, need, then you're really not going to know what's going to be comfortable for you until you start going out and trying on different pairs in the shops. And I certainly swear by the idea that you are going to know the right shoe for you the second that you put it on. If you're putting a shoe or a boot on and you're having doubts about this part that's rubbing and that part that doesn't feel quite right, chances are those issues aren't going to go away over the course of you using it, and it's just going to be something that becomes a point of problem for you in the future. Contrast that with slipping your foot into a shoe that immediately your foot fits into perfectly and it just feels very comfortable at the outset. Okay, maybe it's got a little bit of a hard sole, but you know that that can be fixed by inserting a more cushioned insole, and maybe you need to just do a different lacing technique to get your foot nice and snug in the shoe. The idea that I'm trying to get across here is that the second you slide your foot down into that shoe or boot, it should just feel natural. Other things to consider when we're talking about comfortability is also how soft and supple the material of the shoe or boot is. You might be somebody who prefers to have a nice strong solid fit of maybe a leather boot, or you might be somebody who prefers to have a much lighter weight material that it's made out of so it sort of form fits to your feet a little bit better. Always bear in mind that in some certain forms of footwear there is going to be a period where you're going to have to break them in over a period of weeks or maybe even months. Leather boots in particular come to mind. You do need a little bit of time walking around in these shoes so that your feet can mold to the leather. You can start to stretch out the leather a little bit and make it a little bit softer so that it feels a lot more comfortable on your next outing. And of course we know that the biggest thing that is going to affect how comfortable that shoe or boot is for you is going to be whether or not you've got the right fit. Now this is probably where you're going to have your biggest problem when you are looking for your next pair of footwear, and this could be because of a number of different reasons. Maybe you have a foot that has a little bit of a strange shape to it and it doesn't fit into some of the normal shoes and boots that are out there, or maybe, as unfortunately tends to be the case, you're walking into shoe shops and outdoor retailers where the salesperson and staff don't necessarily have the experience that they need to be able to fit you properly for that shoe or boot. So hopefully this next section of this video will give you some ideas of what to look out for so that you can help to guide that salesperson and hopefully come out with the right shoe for you. So first of all, let's talk about size. And I'm sure that I probably don't need to tell you that because of the vast array of different manufacturers and brands of footwear out there, the sizing between the different companies and the different styles of shoes, even from those companies, can vary widely. So just because you are, say, a US size 8 in all of your normal everyday footwear does not mean that you are necessarily going to be a US size 8 in a hiking shoe or boot. So throw out all those notions of what size you think your feet are before you even set foot in the shop. If you're in a shop where they do have a measuring device there, then I would highly recommend you ask the salesperson to measure your foot up properly. This is going to give you a good starting point, and then I would suggest that you start to look at boots or shoes that are at least half a size, and if not maybe a full size bigger than what your foot measures up to. Once you've got that shoe or boot actually in front of you, the first thing that we're going to check is to make sure the shoe is actually long enough for what you need. And to do that, we're going to pop over here and I'm going to show you exactly what we're looking for. Okay, so there are a few different techniques that I like to use when I'm trying to suss out whether or not a shoe or a boot is long enough for me. The first one is very simple, but it's something that many people don't even think about, and that is to simply take the insole out of your shoe or boot and put your feet right up against this, and just to see how much room you're going to have in your toe. So let's do that with this boot here. And we're going to pull out this insole inside, pop it on the ground, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand up fully, put my heel right into the back of where that insole is, stand up so that my foot splays out naturally on the ground, and see how much room I have in the top. Okay, and to show you this from the top down angle, you'll see I've got my two insoles, my Keen Targi boot on the right hand side and then my Ultra Lone Peak Trail Runner on the left hand side, and I'll show you the fit that I have in both. So I'm just going to be putting my heel right into the back of that heel cup, pushing it down as far as possible, and then standing up properly on the shoe and just seeing how much room I have at the top. And you'll see that actually there's not an awful lot of room there. I'm looking for a complete thumb width when I'm actually standing up properly. If we switch over to the trail runner, same thing, putting my heel all the way to the back of that trail runner, standing up properly so that all my weight is down on that insole, and then checking that I have a bit more room which I do. So I have a full thumb width worth of room in the top of my trail runner shoe. So really what I've illustrated to you there is exactly the problem that I had with my Keen Targi boots when I was hiking. There just was not enough room in those boots for my toes and my feet to move around while I was hiking and splay out naturally, and that is why I ended up having problems with blisters and friction in those boots, as opposed to my Ultra Lone Peak trail runners where I had that nice thumb width worth of gap at the top of my shoe, meaning that my feet had a little bit more room to move around. Now the second technique that I want to show you is what I call the heel gap test. Again, another tried and tested way of making sure a shoe or a boot is long enough for your foot. And again, it involves not even lacing up the boot. So we're just going to take the shoe or the boot exactly how it is. We're going to slide our feet into it like this, and then push our feet all the way forwards towards the front of the boot or the shoe. So your toes should be touching the front at this point. Then we're going to sort of stand up again because we want to get that proper amount of pressure down onto the ball of your foot. And then we're going to put either one finger or two down the back there and just make sure that we have a substantial gap towards the back of that shoe. Now my fingers are right at the back of my shoe there, and I don't have an awful lot of room to move again. Let's contrast that with, again, my Ultra Lone Peak trail runner. So I'm going to do the same thing. Slide my foot in. I'm going to push it all the way towards the front of that shoe, so my toes are pushing right up at the front here, and again do that same thing, sliding my fingers down the back, and my fingers there have an awful lot more room to move. And again, that means that I have a bit more space in these shoes to actually make sure that my feet can move around comfortably, which means that I'm going to reduce the amount of friction in my shoe. And the final technique that I'm going to show you is the toe tap test, and for this we do need to have the shoe or the boot done up properly, so make sure that you get it done nice and snugly. It doesn't have to be done super tight, just enough to keep your foot locked in there nicely. You want to stand up and you want to just tap your toe or your foot against the ground like this. So we're going to put a bit of weight onto your standing leg and just tap your foot like this onto the ground behind you. And what you're feeling for is to make sure that your toe is not hitting the top of the shoe or the boot. This obviously simulates you hiking downhill, and so if your toe is touching the top of the shoe or the boot while you're doing this, chances are that it is going to be doing exactly the same thing when you are hiking on a downhill stretch on a trail. Okay, so now that we know that the shoe is long enough for what we need, the next thing that we need to think about is whether the shoe is wide enough for what we need. And a lot of the times this will depend on exactly how big the toe box in that shoe is. Well, basically the toe box is everything forward of about where the top third of your feet actually sit in the shoes. It is primarily where your toes will be, and the idea of getting a nice wide toe box is so that your toes can splay out naturally in the shoe as you're walking. Of course, we know that the biggest cause of blisters when you're out on the trail is friction, and if you can do everything that you can to stop friction from occurring, then you're going to have a much more comfortable and much less painful experience. By having that large toe box and allowing those toes to splay out nicely, you're actually creating room in between your toes, or at least more room than you would otherwise if you have a very narrow toe box. You're allowing your toes to move a lot more naturally and hopefully creating less friction. This is why when I'm shopping for new shoes now, I specifically look for shoes with wide toe boxes, and it's why on my thru hiking adventures so far I have preferred to use Ultra shoes. Alright, so we've checked that the shoe is long enough, we've checked that the shoe is wide enough for your feet, and now the final thing that you want to check is to make sure that your heel is not slipping, again creating any friction that might lead to blisters. So this is where for the first time you're going to lace up your boots properly, and you're going to have a nice walk around the shop to make sure that you're not getting any of that heel slip. Now while we're on this subject, I just want to cover off exactly how important a good lacing technique is. Now when it comes to heel slippage in particular, there are a lot of different ways that you can lace up your shoe or boot to stop that heel from slipping and therefore creating friction. And we're going to pop over here right now, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways depending on two different types of shoes. The heel lock method of lacing is well known throughout the hiking community for being able to create a lot less friction in your shoes or boots and hopefully prevent all those nasty blisters. So I'm going to show you a couple of different methods for doing the heel lock lacing technique in a boot, and then I'm also going to show you a method for doing that in a trail runner as well. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start with is our boot, and I must mention at the outset here that my Keen Targi boots are a mid-rise boot, and so I do only have one eyelet on my boots. If you have a longer boot with a lot more eyelets, then this technique becomes infinitely easier. So what I'm basically doing is making sure that my boot is nice and tight around this area so that it is drawing my heel back and down towards this corner of the boot. And one tried and tested method of doing this is by reverse lacing. I don't know the technical name for this, but basically it is starting up from the top and then working your way down so that you end up tying off the boot in this region of the boot itself. But I'm basically going to take my laces and I'm going to go straight up and around the eyelets at the top of the shoe to start with. And then I am going to come back down and I'm going to lace down into my second row of eyelets down here. These ones don't have hooks, so I have to physically lace these. And again, I'm not a professional, this is just to give you an idea of what you can do. If you want to check out proper methods of lacing properly from professionals, there's plenty of videos on YouTube to show you how to do that. So once I've got it into that second eyelet down there, I'm going to tie it off as normal, and we're going to get it as tight as is comfortable. And already I can feel that my heel is being forced down into this back corner of the shoe, which is going to stop it from slipping too much as I'm hiking. I can basically not move that too much at the moment. The second well-known method for locking your heel down into that back corner is what is called the surgeon's knot, and very simply it's basically just a normal start of a loop. We do it once through and then we do it again twice through. So I'm wrapping my lace around twice as I'm doing it, and I'm getting that nice and tight, locking it up through my eyelets there and doing exactly the same thing. So I'm going once round to get a normal tie, and then I'm just going to go round again and do another one. And it's just a really secure way of tightening your boot, which is going to stop your ankle from slipping. And again, you can do a single or a double knot depending on your laces when you get to the top, and it feels a lot more secure so that your boot doesn't slide around so much on your heel. Now with a trail runner, obviously you don't have the advantage of having that nice high boot that you can lock down into that back corner, but there is a very simple way that we can achieve the same result with a trail runner instead of a boot, and that is by using these little eyelets at the top of your trail runners that most people don't even ever use. So what we're going to do is a method or a technique called the runner's loop. I'm just going to get this tightened up as nice as I can first, but all we're going to do is feed our lace through that eyelet to create a loop on the shoe like this. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side like this. So now I have two loops. I'm going to lace my shoe up, or pull it as tight as I can to get my foot locked into place, and then I'm going to put the other lace, the opposite lace to the loop, through this side, and I'm going to put this lace through the loop on this side, and I'm just going to tighten it up. So you can see I've got now this very narrow gap at the top of my shoe by pulling those two laces together, and then I'm just going to lace it as normal. And again, basically what this helps to achieve is by pulling those two sides of the trail runner in, you are locking your heel down into the back, and now I have a very stable, secure fit on my heel, and it's not going to slide around too much when I'm hiking. And this is also a great place to just talk a little bit about insoles. So just as different methods of lacing up your boots can make all the difference in how they fit, so can a good set of insoles. The standard insoles that come with hiking shoes and boots are really just that one size fit all approach. So for example, the ones that came in my Ultra Lone Peak trail runners are just a very thin insole that goes inside. They're designed to fit into that particular size of shoe, and it doesn't really give you any more support than the shoe itself gives you. But contrast that with, for example, what I picked up when I was out on Te Araroa to give me specifically a little bit more support. This is an orthotic insole that I added into my shoes after the first week of hiking, and you can see that it gives me a lot more support through my arch. It's also quite deep through the heel, so it gives me a little bit more cushioning, and I'm also able to cut it down and fit it exactly to my shoes so that I am more comfortable when I am hiking. This really allows you to customize your shoe or your boot exactly to what your needs are, and there are hundreds of different types of insoles out there on the market for you to try for this purpose. So if you get a pair of shoes or boots and you find that even after you've been walking around in them for a couple of weeks you're still experiencing issues, I'd suggest that you go and have a chat to a pharmacist or maybe even your podiatrist to see what kind of insoles you might be able to buy to give you some extra support and cushioning and make that feel on your feet a little bit more comfortable. Let's move into some other general things that you can be on the lookout for when you're deciding to choose your next pair of hiking shoes. One of the biggest considerations that I in particular have is how breathable is the shoe that I'm looking at. You don't want moisture in your shoe, just like you don't want any friction points, because that could potentially lead to blisters, and also it could potentially lead to fungal infections and other nasty things later on down the track. So having a nice breathable shoe is very important, and this works really nicely again with that sock system that we were talking about earlier. If you have a good pair of socks that are going to wick the moisture away from your skin on your feet while they're in the shoes, then that's going to work really nicely and complement the breathability of the shoe. Breathability is of course important for a number of other things as well, and most important for me, a breathable shoe often means a shoe that is going to dry a lot quicker. Now if you're somebody who hikes a lot of the time through desert or sandy environments, then probably this isn't going to be something that bothers you too much. But for me, hiking here in New Zealand, where you've seen some of the conditions out there, we are dealing with rain and mud on a daily basis and also plenty of river crossings, then I need a shoe or a boot that I know is going to dry out overnight when I'm out on a multi-day trip. There is nothing worse than putting on wet shoes in the morning, and there's a number of reasons why this is a very bad idea. Unfortunately, it is something that just does happen, but if you buy a shoe that is going to dry out a lot quicker than your other normal shoes, hopefully you won't have to deal with it on too much of a regular basis. Now typically your more breathable shoes are generally going to be the ones that are made from those lighter weight synthetic fabrics. They might also have a very thin upper instead of the thicker upper that you're likely to find on something like a hiking boot. And this is again why I tend to prefer to hike in something like trail runners rather than a specific boot. Now a substantial portion of the boots that you're likely to find out on the market at the moment are probably going to be advertised as waterproof. Now waterproof boots can be really great. I own a pair of Keen Targi boots and I love to go out hiking in the rain with them. When I'm walking on a very nicely maintained trail, I know that I can keep my feet nice and dry and nice and warm on a good day hike when I'm out hiking in those boots, and I really like the fact that I can walk through rivers that are just lower than those boots and not get wet. But then contrast that against my experience on Te Araroa. If I'd been using those exact same boots on a lot of the days where I was hiking through the muddy and rainy patches, where my feet were sinking into large puddles of mud right up to my knees almost, it doesn't matter how waterproof those boots are, they still would have gotten wet and filthy and muddy inside anyway. And the problem with them, because they have that waterproof lining which is designed to keep moisture out, is that once that moisture and dirt gets inside the boot, it's got nowhere to go. The upshot of this is that it often takes substantially longer to dry out a pair of waterproof boots than it would to dry out something a lot lighter like a lightweight pair of trail runners. Again, have a think about what you need and use that as a base to work from. Now one of the biggest debates that I see raging on some of the tramping and hiking forums that I'm a part of is whether or not you need the ankle support that a boot provides over something like a trail runner. Now I have no intentions of adding to this debate. All I'm going to say is that that really is a matter of personal choice. If you're somebody who spends an awful lot of time up in those really mountainous, rugged, dangerous kinds of terrain, then probably you are going to need a boot that is a lot sturdier and that has some decent ankle support to stop you from doing yourself a serious injury in some of that rough terrain. But if you're somebody like me who just hikes on some pretty well maintained trails most of the time and is more of a 3-season hiker than a 4-season hiker, chances are you're not going to need that much extra ankle support. Also, you have to think about whether or not you are used to hiking in something like boots, or whether you're somebody who hasn't done a lot of hiking, or maybe all the hiking you've done you've always ever done in your running shoes. All I would say is that if you are used to doing something a particular way, if you're used to hiking in boots with a lot of ankle support, don't change it unless you really need to. And conversely, if you're somebody who's always hiked without that ankle support, then really evaluate exactly what you need the shoes for, whether there is a legitimate reason for you to have ankle support or not, and if there isn't, maybe you just want to stick to what you've always known. Personally though, I am a fan of trying to strengthen my ankles naturally so that I don't have to rely on a boot that provides a lot of ankle support. Now, of course, I am a younger person, perhaps my bones are a little bit stronger anyway than say those who are a little bit older, and so if you think that there are reasons like that why you should maybe have a little bit of extra support, then of course that's perfectly valid as well. And of course, bearing in mind that you can also get different heights in those shoes as well, so you can go from your very low rise trail runners or hiking shoes which have no ankle support all the way through to a mid-rise hiking boot or shoe, something like my Keen Targies, which just come up to just above the ankle, and all the way through to your standard proper hiking boot, which is a lot higher and will come up all the way past your ankle. You have the option to decide which one of those suits you better, and I'd highly recommend that you do try a couple of different styles when you're out in the shops to see what fits you better and feels more comfortable. Now, one thing that we haven't really talked about so far is how much weight are you going to be carrying on your back? Are you buying a pair of shoes that needs to be able to support not only your weight but also maybe a 20-kilo backpack on your back? I really hope not, for your sake, but some people do have to carry heavy loads like that. Or are you somebody like me who strives sort of towards the more ultralight end of the spectrum, and you're probably only going to be carrying anywhere between 10 to 15 kilos max? The kind of weight that you are carrying on your back will determine the kind of shoe that you need to buy, and in particular you need to be paying attention to the midsole that runs through the shoe. The midsole is what provides the rigidity through the middle of the shoe to provide you that support to carry that kind of weight. Now, a lot of people will tell you that yes, if you are going to be carrying those heavier weights, say anything upwards of about 15 kilos, then you do need to be in a pair of boots. It's not something that I can particularly personally comment on because I don't tend to carry that much weight. But what I can tell you is that on an average day on Te Araroa, I was probably carrying around about 12 to 14 or 15 kilos worth of gear, and I was hiking in those trail runners that I talked earlier about. And I can't honestly say that I noticed any kind of a difference with hiking in trail runners versus hiking in my Keen Targi boots, which I switched to at the end of the trail. Now, the last and final thing I want to cover off in this video is just to talk a little bit about the grip that you're going to get on the shoes. Now, typically and probably quite obviously, you're always going to get much deeper lugs on the bottom of a proper pair of hiking boots than you are going to find on something like a trail runner. And if you're wondering what on earth a lug is, then it is basically the raised and indented pattern on the bottom of your boot which provides the grip. Now, theoretically, the deeper those lugs are, the more grip it is going to provide you. And so on a mountaineering or just a more heavy duty hiking boot, you're going to find very deep lugs, and that's specifically so that if you're sliding down a scree slope, for example, all that scree can be going up inside the lugs and giving you that extra traction that you need. Contrast that with something like your normal standard tennis shoe, which pretty much doesn't have lugs. It just has a little bit of a pattern on the bottom of the shoe to give a little bit of traction so you don't go sliding everywhere, but not too much. Trail runners are sort of a happy medium between the two. They're a good compromise for people who want to go with something like a lightweight shoe. They do tend to have slightly deeper lugs, and depending on the brand that you go with will depend on exactly how deep those lugs are. Now, I'd encourage you, if you are leaning more towards the trail runner, that you take a good look at what the options are, and especially consider and compare them against each other as to what pairs have the deeper lugs. You can't have too much grip out on the trail, and that's something that I've learned the hard way over the years. I tend to slip and slide all over the place regardless. My legs and feet just tend to lock up when I'm going downhill, but you can never have too much grip. It's always a good thing to have, and so if you can get a shoe that has slightly more over maybe another brand, then I don't think that's going to be a disadvantage. Alright, we are at the end of this video and I hope that you've come away feeling a little bit more confident about the things to look out for the next time that you're out shopping for a new pair of hiking shoes or boots. This video is another video in my beginner hiker series. It's aimed specifically at those who are just getting started in hiking to give them a little bit more of an idea of what things they should be looking out for when they're choosing their new gear. Now, regardless of whether you are a beginner and you still have questions after the end of this video, or if you're somebody who's more experienced and you think that I've missed something out, please go ahead and drop me a comment down below and I'll get to it as soon as I can. Otherwise guys, don't forget, if you like this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and ding that notification bell. Next week I'm going to be following straight on in this beginner hiker series to cover off all the things that you can do to take care of your feet properly when you're out on the trail, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Until then guys, take care and stay safe out there.